Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Roberto Mezzina, who is, we're very pleased to have you here, former director of the Department of Mental Health in Trieste and currently Vice President of the World Federation for Mental Health. And yeah, I think that's probably all I need to say. So thank you, Dr. Mezzina.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It's a real pleasure. I'm really emotional and moved to be here. Sorry for my Italian, for my English, which is Italo-English. So anyway, I will try to do my best and not using the slides, which are, you know. So I've tried to adjust to my to the mood today. I think it's everything that we are sharing today is based on personal experience. It's based on real life stories, and I think I have to say something which is more as a narrative, short narrative of what I've done, what is Trieste. Trieste is about what is my experience in Trieste, rather than describing, you know, in cold in a cold way the template of services. Yeah, I have to say that you know, one of my masters, Franco Rotelli, was the director that followed Basaglia when Basaglia died. Basaglia was the great pioneer in Italy. I think it's well known also abroad. Unfortunately, not so much translated into English because of a number of factors, including some contradictions within the movement for changing psychiatry at that time, which had a Scottish person, Ronald Lane, very famous here, was one of the father of the psychiatry. He had a conversation with Basaglia. They have a dialogue, but at the end there were two alternative protagonists at that time. So Basaglia had not an easy life to be known in the UK at that time. But Basaglia had a lot of experiences taken from Scotland, because he went also to Dingleton Hospital, and he met Maxwell Jones, who was one of the pioneers of the so-called therapeutic community. I don't know if the roots of these old experiences have been lost, but probably most of them. But this was very important at that time to demonstrate that it was possible to have a hospital organized in a different way, to enhance the communication between the patients and the staff, to a little bit at least diminish the gap of power, and having more conversational approach based on meetings and trying to open the doors of the words. But the institution was never put in question. This was the Basaglia criticism. So, well, and Franco Rotelli wrote some time ago that people with mental health problems across the world are probably the most oppressed minority in terms of rights. So of all minorities in the world, and it's not just a minority, because Franco Basaglia said, la maggioranza deviante, it's the deviant majority, because the concept of normality, nobody knows what it is. And we have to recognize that we are made of sick parts, health parts. This is the interplay of our lives. And this, what I'm going to say is based today in other views, like, you know, based on human rights, based on the concept of citizenship, based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, that was never applied to our field. But there was, as you well know, an important convention, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities of United Nations 2006, which is now spreading its influence on mental health. And it's very important to mention that the World Health Organization also organized a training, a diffusion of a training, which is online available on human rights and the realization of human rights, not just respect, but using human rights as one of the most important tools for care. So, right to have a whole life, right to have a dignity. We come from the rejection of the asylum, of course, and the reconversion of that institution into an alternative network of services. This was our experience. I came at the end of this process of closing the asylum in Trieste, which was a big one, with more than 1,000 people inside, most of them without a family of reference, because they were refugees from Istria, from the Second World War, when Yugoslavia took the territory. And at that time, the law was based on concept of dangerousness. Probably you're wondering what it is, but it's very similar to what in the UK, where you said that before. It's conceived as the risk concept, the aversion to risk. So people are seen as potential source of risks rather than being human being to be helped in their fulfillment as persons. So this law was based on this stigma that denied even the civil rights of people. People hospitalized lose the right to vote, for instance, the license to drive. They lose their property. They were under a custodial system. And so they were confined. At that time, could be for the rest of life. So, and the discharge can be done only under the responsibility of the family or the director of the hospital. So Basaglia started to work in that such difficult condition, framework, and he started to change from inside the institution. So the Trieste experience comes from this denial of the old institution, of this kind of rules, this kind of vision. And I have to say that, my story is that I started to study medicine by chance, or probably because my ideal was to change the society coming from the 68, movement, and at that time. So we have great ideas. So probably I would like to be a sociologist or something like that. And then, well, my family said, oh, let's be a doctor. So I started to study medicine, but just in the middle of these studies, I realized that I didn't like so much this, white coats and uniform and kind of treating people as diagnosis and so on. So I had a major crisis. I don't want to please you telling my story, but that's the truth. I stopped to study for a while, and I took medication. I went to a neurologist. At that time, this was the use at the University of Trieste, and I had a very difficult time. What helped me was to look at Basaglia ideas in psychiatry, which was a branch of medicine. So, diverting from the mainstream to that, and also playing music and starting to play double bass and these kind of things. But I started to work in Bari, in the University of Bari, in my hometown in the south, and they had a university ward there. The people were treated mostly by medication and electroshock. Electroshock was a rule, sometimes used for punishment, not just for. And they started to create more and more compartments and locked doors within and with the outside. So when Basaglia came, just when the law was enforced, the new law in '78, to visit this clinic, and we talked with the professor and say, oh, Piero, why are you, how you can teach mental health to your students with locked doors and these kind of things, how they can meet you, the people with these problems, how you can teach them. So he was ashamed, they stopped this work, etc. And then I decided to move to Trieste, where I found a team talking about people and their real lives, so which are their problems. Problems of not just receiving care and just receiving a treatment, but what they do with their income, whether they are poor or not, whether they can work or not, if they have a house or not, if they can be independent or emancipated from the family. Emancipation and autonomy were the words at the time. So talking about whole life, and they even occupy a public building, the team of Basaglia, to demonstrate that there is a right to have a life for the former inmates of the institution. Human rights violations were refused, restrained. One of the first gestures that Basaglia did was to refuse to sign the list of people restrained in the bed. So he said, oh, I'm the director, I don't sign. So stop that. And so refusing to follow the usual rules, breaking this kind of doing was the start. And then he wrote some powerful writings, and I have to mention, putting the illness within parentheses doesn't mean to deny that the person has a serious mental problem, but means not to focus on the diagnosis, but looking at the person behind that, which is hidden under the medical sort of coverage of this is real life. So that means looking at the person that is hidden, working on the positive side of the person, on health and well-being, on aspiration, talents, dreams, etc. So this is where the discussion were about in the mental health centers when a case was presented, not anymore a case, but a person's story. So what this person, not what this person can do in negative terms, like preventing behavioral problems, but what she can do in a positive way. What this person wants, what we can do for this to realize these things together, in the sense that care is a reciprocal endeavor, it's a reciprocal enterprise. It's your recovery, and it's the effort we do to favor it. So, talking about a gentle service, that is important. Staying with a person, being with is the human technology. It's very simple, staying with a person in a moment of crisis. So particularly when you are lonely, when you feel lonely, to break the loneliness. Talking about real life, your narrative, what you can say, not forcing to tell your anamnesis, medical anamnesis, but your real life story, and negotiating about care, sharing decisions with the person, if possible, involving the family, sometimes behind a closed door, where the person refused treatment, staying for hours behind the door on a landing in a house, and sometimes the police came and trying to manage and to mediate between the person, the police, the family, etc., trying to provide, to help people in having some consent to relationship and then to care, but relationship comes first. So the value of telling story is also because one of the most powerful tools is to understand the meaning of a crisis. So understanding why a person entered into a crisis. This is a question, why, that is never wondered by psychiatry. Psychiatry are, focusing, even in my personal crisis, the neurologist never asked me why. It maybe can discover that is why my crisis with my studies, with medicine, with my aspiration, etc. But he never wondered. He provided me, some medication, tricyclic antidepressant that I stopped very soon. Anyway, so we set up this system of services. I came in the beginning of the, shaping the community mental health center. That is the kind of hub that you are in a way describing as an example. You're right, it's not a model. It was, in a way, in evolution from the early days. In the early days, this was mostly as a sort of small therapeutic community, people sharing the space, discussing a lot. Also, there were individual talks and consultation, but this was not the core. The core was a collective work based on groups, on talking, and also the team was engaged as a collective group of people, not just the individual case managers. I heard about the CPN, people depending their life on a single person. Even this person can be fantastic. We have to rely on a service that is a collective entity with a culture behind that. So it's not the community mental health center today, when you come, you have the opportunity to visit, is not a treatment place only. It can be also, it's also a treatment place, but it's a place for people to get in, to share health experiences, life experiences. It's a home-like environment, doesn't look like as a clinic. It's a place, what we call it's a social habitat. It's an environment that can nurture relationships, can favor and foster relationships, a place where you can meet other people for social aggregation. For instance, group of young people, a group of women, they meet together, they discuss their common concerns and experience, etc. So it's based on this concept of hospitality 24/7, with beds, some beds inside. These beds are normal beds. So some, trade unions were questioning these are too low. It's like normal beds. So not the hospital ones. So they can, anyway, but these are different from beds in a hospital because people, your significant others can visit you, can come, your family, your friends can come at any time. And stay with you, with the professionals, etc. So this experience of hospitality rather than hospitalization, this is a shift that we always underline. Don't sever the ties with your life, with your previous life, with your social network. And if you go away, if you refuse, we try to re-engage you. We come to your house, to your place. We try to understand why you went away. We have to renegotiate and rediscuss, and maybe do a different plan. Understand why it doesn't work. No use of compulsion is a goal, is an objective, is a definite objective of work. So, and in the management, etc. The team is a unity. Has to develop a culture, a spirit of a whole service. This spirit is based on ethics and values. So it's a service that is not based on procedures, even good ones, but on the idea there are principles. These are the overarching, horizon, and then you have to adapt your practice to these principles. It's a horizontal as much as possible in terms of power. So it must empower people, and also within the staff, not too much hierarchy if possible. There are team meetings which are also open to people using services to hear about discussion about life stories, etc., and to discuss a personal plan, for instance. It's about breaking the roles sometimes, playing football with the service users, going having a musical band, as I do, I play, or there are theatrical activities that they do into the most important theater of the city of Trieste with an important company called l'Accademia della Follia. And our, the new guys which are in touch with the services can be, maybe suggested to be part of this, have an experience within the theater, etc. So, and professional, also trying to break the rules of being a professional. That means showing the human being that you are. So that's an important point. And all the studies of recovery underline that you can help recovery when you show something about your humanity, which is behind your role. But this is not studied in medical professions and psychological professions. It's very strange. They teach us to put a distance to people. So it's about personal care. 1/3 of the money is spent in personal budgets. That means something that is planned with you as a person using services, with your network, if you want, and with the contribution of the NGOs, the social cooperatives in our case, that contribute to the fulfillment of the objectives we agree behind the standard care, entering into your daily life, about housing, about work, about social relationships. So helping a person to get out of the corner that sometimes the crisis encompasses in one's life. So the community and its organization must enter the service in this way. So practically, the service is co-produced with community organization. Daycare is also done in this way. All the association contribute to promote sports and advocacy, all kinds of activities that can be useful for having a full experience as a human being, not just a person receiving care. The recovery house has been developed in this way with the help of some fantastic British colleagues and friends, Paul Baker and John Jenkins particularly. The social cooperatives for work provide 300 people place and train opportunities for working in the city, managing a conference like this, for instance, providing food, managing a restaurant, and a small hotel, services for the municipality, etc., etc. And so the importance of the extra clinical component. So people don't only need treatment, medication, psychological therapies, but people need a proposal for changing the life, for improving the quality of life. Mental health is not definitely just psychiatry. We sometimes forget as clinicians to say that. It's an individual goal, mental health, but it's also a collective enterprise of a community. It's important to change the culture about mental health. Care is not just treatment. Care is an overall concept. Recovery is not cure, you know better than me. It's a personal issue, but also it's a social issue because you need social opportunities to fulfill your recovery right, because that's a right. So there are several factors that can be individualized in your own life because these are related to your meaning that you put in your life. And service must be a catalyst for this experience, not just providing, again, intervention, but experiences like holidays, art activities, women groups, sport, etc., etc. Few words about risk aversion. I think this is, I heard from Lorenzo, from Vincenzo, this is one of the most difficult obstacles in the UK and in the concept of the NHS. I think that this results mostly in putting people in some kind of restrictions. So that's the way of preventing these risks in controlled conditions, but just for a while, then your life cannot be controlled. And sometimes we know that, hard moments are within they happen within institutions, in locked places. People can be suicidal in those places. So what kind of prevention is that? It's just preventing people from having problems as professionals. So our choice is not adversing risk, but accepting positive risk-taking, risking, counting on the person, relying on the person, making an agreement, betting on the person, doing together. So it's a common enterprise, as I said, for health and recovery. Social needs, social inclusion, and are some of the key issues for that. Few words just to conclude. I try to do some other experiences of setting up some sort of similar service or based on similar ideas and principles in the UK. I remember old times in Sheffield. I came in 1985 with great Professor Alec Jenner at the University of Sheffield, a great scientist, great person, and also he created the magazine Asylum, that probably you know. And then he had a pupil, Tim Kendall, now is the National Director for Mental Health. He came to Trieste. We had a lot of exchanges, and they planned to do something similar in Sheffield. Didn't happen. In '98, I came to Birmingham, and with my friend Sashi Dharan, who's going to talk now, and John Jenkins and John Money and other great leaders, we plan to do it in Birmingham to, in a way, make a sort of mix of their experience and our, but for a lot of problems, this didn't happen at the end. In 2004, I went to North Essex. I found a place, and then to Colchester, Islington in London, Cornwall, Hertfordshire, Wales, where something is happening now. That's a good news. In West Wales, they're doing a system almost same than the Trieste approach with community mental health center, closing acute units and replacing by 24-hour centers. And even SLAM, South London mostly is considering that. And now Inverness, and while we have a conversation with Los Angeles too. But these are common ideas for all of us. It's not just that it's an heritage or legacy that just Trieste has. It's the common experience of those who want to change mental health across the world. There is an organization as an umbrella for all these experiences. It's called International Mental Health Collaborating Network. There is a website, probably some of you know, that the purpose of this organization is change the thinking, change the practice, and change the service. This is a a circle. You cannot just change a service without changing the way of doing the practice and without changing the mentality, the mindset, etc. So I think I'm fascinated by the Joshi project. I think the Joshi Hub is a sort of whiteboard. Everyone can put his dreams and, and write something on it. That's a great opportunity for co-produce it. Well, so this dream comes true, and finally Scotland, maybe we can succeed it. Thank you very much.